Hi everyone, I'm not always going to do an introduction before the expert episodes because they are very self-explanatory, but I am popping in because my menace of a cat Dottie during this episode knocked my microphone jack out of the plug at some point during this record, and the microphone switches from my good quality microphone to my headphone microphone, and so it goes from sounding normal to sounding like I am talking underwater, and that is because of my cat, and I'm so sorry, and there was no way for me to fix it. I did what I could to try and recover the sound quality for you guys, but it sort of just is what it is, and the information from Shrenika was so good that I didn't want to scrap the episode because it was great. So apologies for that. I will post a photo of Dottie the Menace so you guys can see the culprit herself on my Instagram. So if you want to see whose fault it is that this episode sounds rubbish from me, I'll put it on my Instagram. Other than that, I hope you enjoy Shrenika's expert episode and her big-brained goodness, and that if you asked a question, it gets answered. Love you! Say it back.
Why do your parents like that?
Right, hey everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Why Do You Expert Like That? Very exciting today because we have Shrenika from Little Beat First Aid here. And Shrenika doesn't know this, but I've actually done one of her courses through Oniwa Parent Centre, and she was amazing. Yep, after I had my first, Freddie, and my husband and I did it was over Zoom during COVID times. My husband and I did it together, and afterwards we were like, oh my gosh, she just answered every question that we had no idea about the answers to, that felt so overwhelming, and so you were so good at breaking everything down for us. So you were a very important person for us.
Oh, thanks. That's good to know. You kept that a secret?
I know. It's like, I was like, I'll tell you at some stage. Do you want to just introduce yourself and who you are and what you do?
So I run Little Beat First Aid. I'm teaching infant and child first aid courses specifically for parents and families. I'm just giving that sort of basic knowledge needed to deal with emergency situations at home with little ones, managing illness, knowing where to go for help, when to get help, all of those kind of things. Just hoping to make people a little bit more confident in case they ever encountered any of those kind of scenarios in their lives with their little ones. My background is in paediatric nursing. I've worked at Startup Children's and been a nurse for about 18 years. Had a little bit of a break when my 2 boys were little, and that's when I started teaching these sessions. So yeah, that's kind of where my background knowledge comes from. I'm also certified by the New Zealand Resus Council for teaching members of the public CPR and first aid, because it's a little bit different to what we do in a hospital environment as well. But yeah, so I have 2 boys and a husband, and yeah, busy life.
Yeah. And something cool that Shrenika does is she comes into your home. There are options for her to come into your home and teach LESA or first aid in your home, which is great. So if you've got little babies or little kids, or if you've got family members that you want to try and sort of have everyone in at once, that's a really awesome option for making sure that everyone who'll be having eyes on your bub is confident with how to keep them safe.
Yeah, definitely helpful for everyone to know and everyone be on the same page about things as well.
Absolutely. And so convenient to be able to have you come to them as well. That is parents everywhere thanking you for that option. Cool. So we have, if you haven't listened to an expert episode of the podcast before, basically this is a space where I get smart people like Shrenika on and then get listener submitted questions for her to answer. And so we have 5 today, 2 of which are quite similar, so we'll pop them together. But yeah, so I'm just going to jump right on into them. Maybe we'll start with the 2 questions that are similar. Okay, so the first question is starting solids and wondering how common choking is and what we do if it happens. And the second one is a brief rundown on what to do in the instance of choking. I know not to try and retrieve things in the mouth for fear of pushing it further down, but it's such a quick and scary process. What is best practice?
So it's always hard to say how common choking is, because there are a lot of cases of choking that are resolved at home and don't end up needing to go to the hospital, and so we don't really have a lot of statistics on every type of choking situation happening. But so we tend to only really hear about or have statistics on the bad outcomes, which are not super common.
No.
Most people go through their lives without ever choking on anything. Most parents never have to do anything for a choking child in their lives as well. But It is something that just can more easily happen with smaller children because of the size of their airways and their behaviours as they get older as well. So there's a couple of sort of risk factors that put them at that higher risk age group also. Yeah, it is something that can easily happen, so it's just something that's important to know what to do, be able to recognise what it looks like, when to act, all of those kind of things. So just in case it does happen, you're able to do something about it. And it is something that's quite time sensitive, so you really want to be doing something before emergency services get to you. So that's why it's a really important thing to know about, because you can't really wait for the ambulance to arrive in that situation.
Yeah.
But it is like, if we look at sort of hospitalizations, there's sort of around about 30 a year that are result from choking on something, whether it's food or any sort of other foreign object as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that, and numbers wise, it's quite a small number in terms of population level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And then like a brief rundown of what the current advice is for choking if you think your child is choking.
Yeah. So, as in the question, they said they know not to put their fingers in and try and get things out. Yeah, ideally, we don't want to be sticking our fingers in their mouth, especially in those situations. We can potentially push something further back, or if it wasn't a choking situation, turn it into a choking situation, because often people think that their child is choking when they're actually just gagging on something. And so it's really important that we recognise that, knowing when we actually need to jump in or when we can sit back and let them work it out themselves as well.
Yeah.
So that's definitely something that we always talk about in the classes as well, is that gagging versus choking. So first of all, making sure that they're actually choking. So in a choking situation, something's actually gone down the airway path, so it's been inhaled, and that can obviously end up life-threatening. Gagging is when something's just kind of hitting the back of your mouth or hitting the back of the tongue. It's triggering that gag reflex, and they can go sort of like red and flustered in the face, do that gag motion, like stick their tongue out, look like they're going to vomit. Sometimes they do vomit, gurgly noises, watery eyes. It looks really uncomfortable and you feel like you need to be doing something, but it's important to let them work it out. It's a protective reflex that our bodies have, and we don't want to go messing around with that. So if you're noticing those signs, let them work it out, let them gag it out themselves. But if they're choking, it's more sort of that they are not making a sound, or they can't cough, or they've got an ineffective cough, like they just sort of like can't actually cough properly. Or they're changing colour from that reddish to a like bluish, greyish colour. Those kind of signs point to that choking situation. So if you're noticing those signs, that's when we want to jump in and help them out. It's also important, if you're noticing those signs and you think that your child is choking, that we call for help straight away, because we want to get help on the way as soon as possible in case you aren't able to clear it out yourself as well. But yeah, if you're seeing all those signs, they are choking, what we're going to do to actually clear the airway is, and I've got my doll here because I knew this was going to come up.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, so if you are listening on Spotify, you can watch the visuals. If you are listening on a medium that doesn't offer the visuals, I will post this on YouTube, so it will be available on YouTube. So head over to our YouTube to see the demonstration in all its glory.
Yeah, and I'll try and explain everything as if you can't see as well.
Yeah, but that's okay. There is visual offerings, so don't feel like you have to explain yourself completely.
All good. So calling for help, and then what you're going to do is you're going to sort of hold them on a head down position. So sort of head down, bum up is what you want, and you're making sure that you've got a good grip on that head and neck area so that it's all nice and stable. And in that head down position, whether they're on your arm or like over your lap, however works best for you in that situation, you're going to have them in that head down position, and then you're going to give them what we call back blows. So you're basically hitting them hard between the shoulder blades with the heel of your hand. And we want to do that 5 times, and good strong blows, and we're going to check after each one to see whether the object has come out or not. So making sure that you're actually hitting hard. Light taps don't really work, so it needs to be a quick and strong blow. Most children with good back blows have had bruising to the back, so that gives you a bit of an idea of how hard you actually need to be hitting.
And we would rather have bruises than a choking baby. So please don't let the fear of hurting them stop you from appropriately responding to a choking situation.
Exactly, definitely. And we don't want you starting off light either. Definitely start hard from the beginning, because we don't want to waste time with light taps.
Yeah.
So we do 5 of those good strong blows, check after each one. If they start coughing or clearing it out, obviously you don't want to keep hitting them, so let them clear it out. But after 5, if there's still no change, you flip them over, still on that downward angle, but now we're facing up using 2 fingers in the center of the chest. You're going to give them chest thrusts, so it's a quick thrust into the chest, same place as you'd be doing CPR, and on the sternum, and we do 5 of those once again. It's just a different way of trying to get it out, so forcing it from the inside out.
Yeah.
So 5 on the back, 5 on the front, keep going continuously until either they're coughing or they've cleared it out. If they lose consciousness at any point while you're doing this, we're going on to CPR, because at that point we want to keep blood moving around the body, going to the brain while we wait for help to arrive. And that's why it's important that we called for help way back in the beginning, because you don't want to get to the CPR bit and not have help on the way.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So the advice is to call emergency services and then start back blows.
Yeah.
Cool. And I know, like, I felt like this for myself as well. Sometimes you can feel a bit silly calling emergency services, especially if the situation resolves quickly. So just from a medical professional's point of view, just would you mind affirming that it is the right thing to do regardless of how the situation goes?
Yeah, definitely everyone would rather that you call for help and then it's resolved by the time an ambulance gets there than wait until things get worse and then they have less of a chance of survival, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, no one's going to complain or yell at you or, you know, think of you badly if you've called and you've resolved it straight away. And in these situations, they stay on the line with you anyway. So if it's resolved, you can tell them and then, you know, the decision can be made of whether you still need help or not and all of those kind of things. It's still important to still get them checked out after a choking situation anyway.
And I remember being told, I think it might have been you, I can't remember who it was, someone said to me, like, if you've called an ambulance in that situation and it does get to a point where you need to do CPR, even if you've had CPR training, having someone on the line who's CPR trained who can coach you through that when you're in quite a stressed mindset is really helpful. So if it does get to the point where you are needing coaching through CPR, having a professional on the line is not a bad thing. So yeah, definitely don't be afraid to call for help when you feel you need it.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that I do say, so it might have been me.
Yeah,
but
it probably was. I can't think who else it would have been.
But yeah, like even if you know everything, you can definitely go blank in these situations. So having that person on the line is helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Cool. So next question is, my first child was a back sleeper. My second child, 6 months, this is in brackets, 6 months rolling back to front, but not front to back, is a side/front sleeper. So do I need to get him a fancy breathable mattress that social media tries to convince me I need? Or is he okay on the mattress that came with the cot? In brackets, cotton mattress purchased new from an NZ store in 2021.
Obviously, you know, sleeping on back is what's recommended. And it obviously gets a bit tricky once they start rolling. Under 6 months is that kind of higher risk age group when it comes to like SIDS and SUDI and things like that. And so, you know, you are coming out of that higher risk age group. Once they are actually rolling themselves on like back to front or front to back or however, then it becomes less of risk as well because they obviously have good ability to move.
And ideally, theoretically, they should be like able to move their head out of,
but ideally, we're still putting them to sleep on their back. But if they turn over, then they turn over. If you can roll them back while they're asleep without disturbing them, you can do that as well. But yeah, you are sort of in that lower risk area if they're able to move themselves. And theoretically, if they're able to move themselves like that, they're able to move themselves out of tricky positions as well. But in terms of mattresses, it doesn't really appear to make a difference. Like if you look at studies and things like that, it doesn't appear to make a difference as to what kind of mattress they're on. As long as it's a firm mattress, that's what's most important. Breathable may be more helpful in terms of overt, which is obviously a risk factor as well. But we're trying to reduce like all the different safe sleep risk factors. You know, reducing things like keeping their sleep space clear from anything that they could, you know, get close to or anything like that is important. So bed sheets and blankets and all those kind of things, keeping those things out of the way is important. And making sure that the room is at a good temperature, they're dressed appropriately, all of those things help with that as well. Obviously with a breathable mattress, they're not necessarily going to be sleeping on it without anything on. I'm not sure whether with a breathable mattress you'd be putting sheets on anyway.
I presume so, I'm not sure.
Yeah, or like even like, mattress protectors and things like that. So that's probably going to make it less breathable unless you're not putting anything on the mattress, which would make for a lot of washing.
I was going to say, it seems so risky. Cool. Okay.
But yeah,
Awesome.
as long as you've got a good, safe mattress in terms of like, New Zealand standards and things like that. And if you've bought it from here, ideally it should be up to standard. So as long as it's firm, flat, keeping the sleep space. Oh, that's a real tongue twister.
Safe sleep space. I know. I say that a lot when I'm talking about co-sleeping. I'm like, the safe sleep pattern. And I just can never get it out.
But yeah,
Cool.
you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, exactly. So save yourself the money. You don't need to buy a fancy, expensive breathable mattress, but up to you.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Yeah, just, keeping all those risk factors as low as possible is the best thing.
And I also feel like in a situation like this, you know your kid well. You know what their ability is. If it feels a bit off for you that they're sleeping on their tummy, if you're not confident that they'd be able to move themselves out of that position, maybe that's a situation where you're rolling them back onto their back. But if you're pretty confident in there, if you've seen them use their neck strength well enough to move themselves out of risky situations, then, I think that's a follow your gut situation and follow the sleep recommendations. And
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Next question. I'm panicking about the measles outbreak, aren't we all? My kids have their usual vaccinations, but my youngest is too young to have received their MMR vaccine yet. Should I be approaching their doctor about getting an early one? What else can I be doing to protect my kiddies?
So you generally with the measles vaccine, if there is an outbreak where children under 12 months are going to be at high risk, then recommendations do come in to get them vaccinated earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we don't have a lot of cases of measles here at the moment, but there is that risk that there may be. So you could definitely ask your doctor if they think that it is a good idea to get immunised earlier or not. It is something that sometimes is recommended when there is a bigger outbreak, like it back in 2019 or something. Yeah,
it was on placement at Starship during that time.
Yeah.
It was a wild time to be working at Starship. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
So definitely, in that period, people were getting immunised earlier because of the outbreak. So definitely something you can have a chat to your doctor with, and if they feel like it's necessary at this stage, then they may recommend it. But it's probably more likely if there are more cases that might be something that's considered at a sort of population level as well.
Yeah. And then is there anything else that we can be doing?
So in terms of prevention, really making sure that everyone around them has their immunisation as well, family members and things like that as well, and whoever they are kind of exposed to. And with, any sort of like cold and flu symptoms and things like that, because that's how it usually starts. Just being wary about where you're going and things like that as well. And if you are concerned that it is measles, then definitely don't just go straight to your doctors. Call them and let them know that you think it is that you think that your child might have measles, because you don't really want to be going and exposing the rest of the waiting room with that as well. Thinking about that, because often it does just start off as a runny nose and fever and cough and cold symptoms, which could be anything. Developing the rash usually a few days after all those symptoms as well.
So it is, I should know this, but I don't, transmitted by like coughing, sneezing, bodily.
But like really highly transmissible. So like even if someone has been in that room before you who had measles, it can still linger.
Right.
So you may not have to be in the room with them at the time, but if someone's been there and left the room and had coughed and sneezed or breathed or whatever in that room, then there's still a risk of there still being it in there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So is there, like, I guess for someone who was really wanting to practice an abundance of caution, there would be a case for wearing a mask in populated areas and if they wanted to be really careful?
Yeah, definitely. If you're higher risk and things like that, or you're concerned, then having a mask on in those situations will definitely provide a layer of protection.
Cool. Awesome. All right, and then our final question, which only just came through just before we started recording, so Shrenika hasn't had a lot of time to think about it, so we're just going to let her answer however much she wants to answer here. But it is, have you been impacted by the increase of medical misinformation being shared on social media, and how do you manage it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely pre-COVID wasn't so much of a issue, but definitely during and after, it's been a lot more, and you kind of feel like you need to explain yourself a lot more and provide a lot more evidence. I mean, that's a good thing, obviously.
Yeah.
But it feels sometimes like the people that are trying to provide evidence-based advice are having to like overcompensate. And, you know, people that are spreading misinformation tend to not have to give any evidence about that. It has definitely changed things in the social media space a bit. It also feels sometimes like that kind of stuff gets pushed out by the algorithms or whatever a lot more. That kind of things that make you stop and, you know, watch and things like that. Whereas like boring, important information doesn't get seen as much. It's really hard to grab people's attention with.
It must be so frustrating feeling like you need to like be really good at social media to get the good information out there. You're like, I'm a nurse, I'm just trying to give people first aid information. Like, I'm not trying to like catch your attention. I'm just trying to give you life-saving information.
Yeah, totally. And then, you know, you're always, and it shouldn't be, but you're always scared to talk about things like vaccinations and things like that on here. I remember when it was like COVID, when my kids got vaccinated, I talked about like their experience getting vaccinated, and you know, I had a few messages like, you know, how could you do that to your children, and you know, all those kind of things. And it's like I kind of was like, oh well, I don't really know, I don't really want to engage in that at all, because there's nothing that I can say I feel like that would change your perspective. So yeah, it's more just like putting the information out there. People who want to take it, people who won't take it. And you know, if you're not interested in something, don't follow that person. You don't need to leave nasty comments or things like that just because it's not your perspective. But yeah, you know, it makes for an interesting place. And then obviously in my nursing life, we come across that as well with, you know, families who are hesitant and things like that. It's not something that I feel like we had to deal with a lot in my early nursing career that we have to deal with now. And obviously in that situation you have to be, you know, respectful and understand other people's views and things like that. But it can definitely be frustrating.
You're like, but it's just the science. I just know it's the science. I know that it's right, I promise. All right. Well, those are all our questions. Thank you so much for jumping on today and sharing all of your knowledge with us. I'm sure it has brought a lot of people some good information, so we're very grateful.
You're welcome. Yeah, hopefully that's helped some people and once again made some people a little bit more confident in their abilities and their decisions and things like that.
Absolutely. Cool. And then if you have, for listeners, if you have any more questions about first aid or anything like that, you can follow Shrenika. I will link her in the show notes. Follow Little Beat First Aid, get her into your house, do a refresher course. If you've got older kids, like just make sure you're feeling like your knowledge is up to date, because that is life-saving knowledge. And we love having life-saving knowledge in our pockets ready to go. Awesome.
Why do you parent like that?
Thank you for listening to this episode of Why Do You Parent Like That? Why Do You Parent Like That is created by me, your gal, Abby Harrison. Huge love and snuggles to my gorgy nephew and niece, Thomas and Francis, for lending their voices to my jingle, as well as a massive thank you to the iHeartRadio Podcast Network team for giving this little pod a place to call home. Be sure to follow our socials to stay up to date with podcast happenings, as well as chaotic insights to my life. If you have a story that you reckon would be neat to share on the pod, flick me an email at whydoyouparentlikeThatpodcast@gmail.com. Love you! Say